It's The Log. I'm Charles Purcell. Oh, how's everybody? Happy New Year. It's the first show of the new year. It's the first show of 2020. It's the first show of the new decade. By the way, okay, let's start here, you guys. It's the 2020s. Can we just decide to not be snarky about this? There are people out there getting real excited and ranting about how this is not the end of the decade. The 2010s don't end until the end of 2020, and the 2020s don't begin until 2021. Now, if you've heard this, you're rolling your eyes right now, or maybe you're agreeing, you're shouting, yes! Because when I see posts about this, there are always commenters who say, yes, absolutely right! Exclamation point. So, example, why 2019 is not the end of the decade. Some random tweets here. At Testudo Dave. Why 2019 is not the end of the decade, despite what you'll hear from a lot of media and others who don't understand how the origins of our calendar work. I'm here to inform you about why 2020 is actually the end of the current decade. 2019 is not the end of the decade. 2020 is. The first decade went from year 1 to year 10, and so it progressed. There was no year 0. We went straight from 1 BC to 1 AD. Okay, you're just being a jerk. Of course, we all know this. But it's 2020. And it's really just about naming things. Okay? We're just naming it. We can name things whatever we want. The fact that the calendar started 1 AD after 1 BC is just an arbitrary decision like every other arbitrary decision. You're not relying on some great universal truth about the cosmos. So, yes, if you're looking at the calendar as created by that monk somewhere or the I forget how it all worked. You know more than I do. Okay? Let me just concede that right now. Okay? For those of you arguing this, let me concede, you know more about this than I do. You're right, I'm wrong about all the facts, okay? I'm conceding that. What I'm saying is you don't have to be a dick about it. It's 2020. It's the 20s. If you're looking at the 1920s or the 1930s or any other decade of the last couple hundred years or several hundred years, any historian who writes a history textbook about the 1930s is going to start with 1930. He's not going to start with 1931. It's just a convention. Get over it. This is really dopey, you guys. Come on. Anybody spending any time worried about this and so anxious to correct the rest of us who don't understand how the calendar works. Just, you know what? It's the 20s. Okay? It just is because we've all decided it is. And that's all that matters. Now, there are some things people can't decide. There's some things that are true and not true. You know, basic rules of physics. If I drop my pencil, it's going to fall to the floor. Let's find out if that's true. Hold on my pencil. Letting go. Yep, drop to the floor. Just wanted to confirm that. Now, we can't just decide that that's not true. Okay? We can't decide that. But this, we can decide. The journey of the Earth around the sun and the journey of the moon around the Earth and all of that are real, and there's timing involved and all of that. Sure, that's fine. Those are all real things where opinions do not matter. Just because we agree on something, if we all agreed the moon is made of cheese, that would not make the moon made of cheese just because we all agreed on it. No, facts matter. But you have not got the facts on your side. Oh, I can hear you screaming. Your fact that we went from 1 BC to 1 AD is, yes, it's a fact, but that was a decision. It's not written in the stars. It's not handed down from God on high that 1 BC directly preceded 1 AD. That's just a decision that people made. And again, you're smarter than me, so you can tell me exactly who made that decision, what king or what emperor or what monk, or, I don't know. It's the 20s. Just no more of these. No more. Don't have this argument. It's completely unnecessary. It's the 20s. Just get over yourself. Well, you know what? Last week we had a lot of fun. Chuck and Chucky were here, and we reviewed the year, because that's what you do at the end of the year, right? You do a year in review. So we reviewed 2019, and there were a couple of egregious errors of omission that I want to fix right now. I don't know if this is true for you. When I was a kid, we had a yearbook in high school. Of course, you probably had that. And at the end of the very end of the year, like the last day of school, we would get an addendum, a little supplement, a little, 4, 5, 6 page supplement to put into our yearbook that covered the things that happened late in the year, in the spring, that happened after our deadline for the yearbook publication. I was on the yearbook committee, by the way. I was the staff cartoonist. I drew cartoons. I had a whole page of caricatures of our teachers. That was fun. So that was my job on the yearbook staff. And I drew little side cartoons in the margins. I stole that idea from Mad Magazine. They'd have just little, no word, just little picture jokes in the margins, very tiny. So I was very proud of that, proud of my work. Anyway, so yeah, the supplement would cover the baseball team or whatever other spring sports there were. The junior prom always happened very late in the year, so there'd be pictures of the junior prom. And so there you go. So this is my supplement. Not because things were too late. This is because we were lax in our duties to cover some very important things. And right on the top of the list, 2019 was the year, of course, of those horrible, horrible abortion laws all over the country, mostly in the South, but they wandered up into the North as well. Terrible, the heartbeat law, which you should know, that's not a heartbeat you're hearing at 6 weeks. It's just what all cells do, basically. They make this little sound just on the cellular level. So that's not a heartbeat you're hearing. So these heartbeat laws, you can hear a heartbeat at 6 weeks, so abortion is illegal. That's junk science if you haven't heard that. So terrible laws. I won't go through them all again, but certainly worthy of mention. They all happened within just days of each other, sometimes weeks, but some of them very close. And they were all kind of coordinated and written by the same folks. And you know how these Republican state legislatures get together and ALEC gets involved and very similar laws are passed around the country at the same time. It's like, oh, how is this happening? It seems so mysterious, but of course it's all planned. And most of the laws, I can't tell you the exact. In fact, I think that's maybe why they didn't make it into last week's show, because we were being a little lazy and just had the holiday buzz going, and we didn't want to do any actual research. So not sure where they all stand, but some of them have gone into effect. Most of them have not gone into effect. My best understanding, they remain in the courts because that was their strategy all along. They knew the laws they were passing were illegal, unconstitutional. They knew it. They knew damn well, but that was their strategy from the very beginning, to get them into the courts, and hopefully they'd work their way up. They keep getting defeated in the courts, and their stays, and so the laws don't go into effect. But then they work their way up, and they keep getting defeated, and they keep appealing, and hopefully they'll find one of those Agent Orange appointed judges who will be on their side. Of course, it'll still be appealed. So their big goal all along was to get this to the Supreme Court, to get it to Brett I Like Beer Kavanaugh and Neil I'm Illegitimate Gorsuch, and they could finally strike down Roe v. Wade and make these horrible abortion laws legal. So, 2019 was the year for that. And certainly worth a mention, and one of the worst things we did as a country. We do a lot of screwy things. That was one of the worst. Mother Jones had an interesting article. 2019 was a banner year for abortion laws, and not the kind you think. This year I'm reading now, let's see, who's the author I want to give credit? Jessica Washington, Mother Jones. This year will be remembered for an unprecedented red state assault on reproductive rights, from a wave of early-term abortion bans in the South and Midwest to a host of policies aimed at preventing providers from having open conversations with patients about abortion. Conservative state legislators have done everything in their power to limit the right to abortion. But out of the headlines, 2019 was actually a banner year for abortion protections, as progressives in blue states started to fight back and win major legislative battles to protect the rights enshrined in Roe v. Wade. In 2019, more legislation was passed by Democratic state houses to protect the right to abortion than in the entire previous decade. Okay, so that's good to know. I guess I wasn't aware of this. Continuing to read, quote, "The idea of protecting and expanding abortion rights access has been an issue that has been picking up steam over the past 5 years or so," says Elizabeth Nash of the Guttmacher Institute, a reproductive rights research organization that tabulated the pro- and anti-abortion legislation passed this decade. Quote, "But now it feels like it actually broke through." Very good. 9 states, Illinois, New York, Rhode Island, Vermont, Maine, California, Nevada, New Jersey, and Hawaii passed major legislation to protect or expand abortion rights. In total, these states have passed 36 new laws protecting abortion access. While many states expanded rights already on the books, in Illinois, New York, Vermont, and Rhode Island, legislators codified the right to an abortion for the first time, as well as the right to contraception. Although far more states enacted abortion restrictions than protections, the gap between the two has narrowed significantly in the past year, giving hope to progressive politicians that they might not be on the losing side of the abortion battle after all. It's ridiculous we have to have these laws, but we do. It should just be a blanket issue, just free, legal, right on down the line, no restrictions. And the good people appear to have turned the tide and are starting to win this battle. So, we have to stay vigilant against the crazies and the right-wing radicals who want to control women and their bodies, of course. Always have to keep the fight going. It's sad that we have to. Again, it should just be a given. But you know what I'm saying. Something else left from the 2019 review, and that was we did not give any mention to Simone Biles. Holy cow. She did this year in 2019. She did what no other human being has ever done. She did things with her body, athletically speaking, that no other human in the history of humans has ever done. I'm looking at the AP right now. Biles named 2019 AP Female Athlete of the Year. What's this Female Athlete of the Year stuff? Just Athlete of the Year. What's that all about? Reading now Will Graves from AP. They're called Simone things, a catch-all phrase for the casual ease with which Simone Biles seems to soar through her sport and her life. The irony, of course, is that there's nothing casual or easy about it, any of it. The greatest gymnast of all time and 2019 Associated Press Female Athlete of the Year only makes it seem that way. Those jaw-dropping routines that are rewriting her sport's code of points and redefining what can be done on the competition floor. Born from a mix of natural talent, hard work, and a splash of ego. The 25 World Championship medals, the most by any gymnast ever, the result of a promise the 22-year-old made to herself when she returned to competition in 2017 after taking time off following her golden run at the 2016 Olympics. So good for her, good for her. Also, not to tarnish this, but even in the wake of the terrible sexual assault scandals that plagued women's gymnastics, But let's not go there. So Simone Biles definitely deserves a mention in any 2019 year in review. So there it is. And then one other, this caught my eye, and I thought I'd share it with you. 19 striking findings from 2019 from a site called Fact Tank. And I'm just going to, as always, I always link these to the Facebook page so you can find them there. But I'll just mention, I'll just give you the headlines. Number 1, Hispanics are projected to be the largest racial or ethnic minority group in the 2020 U.S. electorate, overtaking the number of black eligible voters for the first time. So that's interesting. 2, the decline of Christianity is continuing at a rapid pace in the U.S. Can't happen quick enough for me. Yeah, you should see these charts, man. Rapid. Around the 2/3 of U.S. adults, 65% describe themselves as Christians, according to Pew Research Center telephone surveys conducted in 2018 and 2019. Telephone surveys, wait a minute. That's down 12 percentage points since 2009. Telephone surveys. I love Pew Research. I'm sorry. I said I credited Fact Tank. This is a Pew Research Center website. Fact Tank is just the page. Yeah, I love Pew Research Center. I love them. They do great work. I guess they know better. They know what they're doing. But telephone surveys? Number 3, the U.S. no longer leads the world in admitting refugees. Yeah, we know this, and that's horrible. We went down from just a couple of years ago, 97,000 refugees in 2000, I guess that would be 16. Yeah, leading the world. So that's a good thing to do. On just every front. It's good for the people who need help. It's good for the country. It's good for everybody. It's good to have refugees. It's good to have immigrants. We love the world. We love people. Come be part of our little family. Yeah, and that just plummeted to a 20-year low, went down to 23,000 this year. No longer lead the world. And way, way down from 97,000. And there are refugees out there more and more all the time, especially with climate crisis. We've got climate refugees now. Let's see. I'm not going to go through the entire list. I'm looking at things that are worth commenting on. The foreign-born share of the U.S. population is at its highest point since 1910. All right. So, okay. Yeah, again, the whole immigration thing, you guys are just going to have to get over it. It's just the world, and it's fine. It's beautiful. It's great. Immigrant share of U.S. population approaches historic high, 13.6% in 2017, latest numbers. Majorities of U.S. military veterans, as well as the broader U.S. public, say the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were not worth fighting. Okay, I'm not going to do an I told you so, but of course some of us knew that from day one. Let's see. 2/3 of Americans support the legalization of marijuana. That's flipped entirely from just 10, 20 years ago. Back to immigration. The number of people living in the U.S. without authorization has decreased over the past decade. Decreased. You hear that? Driven by a sharp decline in unauthorized immigrants from Mexico. So if that's your biggest worry, stop it. So, yeah, these are just interesting opinions that Pew Research found. These are findings of the last year. Findings of 2019. Roughly 6 in 10 Americans, 63%, say the legacy of slavery still affects black people in the U.S. today. Of course it does. If you haven't read Ta-Nehisi Coates on this issue, I recommend you do. Let's see. Political independents who don't lean toward one party or the other account for only 7% of Americans. Well, I think that's a duh kind of a thing. You're going to lean one way or another. If you're right in the middle, you're not paying attention. You've heard me rant about this before. People just right in the middle are crazy. How can you not take a side? Whose side are you on? And at the risk of, I promise not to get into this, but I'm really, really, really tired of both sides are polarizing the whole spectrum, and you're moving to your extremes. No. That's just simply not true. I don't care what the right wing is the one that's moved. The fact that the left wants universal health care, that's something most of us have always wanted. And even though it's gaining in traction, it's just a matter of simple progress, the way the world used to work. We used to progress toward being better, creating a more perfect union. Justice would be expanded, rights would be expanded. That's our history. So it's just a natural progression, natural evolution that we want free college and universal health care. Those are natural progressions. That doesn't make us crazy lefty, wild socialist lefties. No. It's the right wing that's gone off the deep end with their Nazis and their abortion laws and their tax cuts for millionaires and their assault on the Constitution and voting rights to get what they want. So, no. Don't play the both sides thing with me on this. No. Oh, this is this is interesting. The most active 10% of adult Twitter users in the U.S. produce 80% of all tweets sent by these users. Okay, just, wow, Twitter. Roughly a third of Gen Zers say they know someone who prefers to be referred to using gender-neutral pronouns. Yep, get used to gender-neutral pronouns. We talked last week about they, T-H-E-Y, being the Merriam-Webster word of the year. They meaning the singular gender-neutral pronoun. Let's see. Concerns about climate change have risen in the U.S., but most of the change has come among Democrats. Yeah, this is mostly sad news. Republicans, conservatives continue to deny it. Democrats and those on the left, well, they have it broken down. Liberal Democrats, it's 94%. Moderate conservative Democrats, down to 76%. Moderate Republicans, 43%. Conservative Republicans, 19%. So the total among Americans is 57%. That is insane. So there's 2019 addendum supplement. When we come back after a short break, we'll do the same thing for the decade. Last week we did our decade in review, the 2010s, and again a couple of egregious errors of omission that we will fix today. I hope your 2020 is going great so far. I hope this decade is just going wonderful for you so far. And I love you. We'll be right back. It's The Log. I'm Charles Purcell. We're fixing up last week's show is what we're doing here. We had our year in review and our decade in review last week. And only after the show was over, we realized there were some things that were really important that we didn't mention. Okay, let's do a little decade in review supplement. Things not mentioned last week. Hurricanes, man. Hurricane Maria in 2017. That, of course, the one that devastated Puerto Rico, as well as U.S. Virgin Islands and Dominican Republic. Total fatalities estimated over 3,000. Now, this was a story. You may remember the official tally was ridiculously low, like something like 16, not accounting for the people who died shortly after the hurricane because of the hurricane. So 16 was just the number of people who got swept away by the, in real time by the winds, but in very short order because of the devastation caused. injuries, lack of clean water, lack of food, lack of medical attention, etc., over 3,000. And nobody's really quite sure. It could be much, much higher than that. And then even after all the data comes out, I hate to bring this back to Agent Orange. He just fouls up everything. Even afterwards, then he's denying those numbers, like calling it politics. So he's horrible in every way you can think of, and that's certainly right up there. So, 2017 Hurricane Maria. And the response and recovery, of course, we have the throwing of the towels and all that horrible stuff. Response and recovery inadequate. And then in 2018, October of that year, Hurricane Michael, 47 confirmed deaths plus hundreds still to this day unaccounted for. Affected areas, Cuba, Florida Panhandle, came up through the Gulf. The fourth most intense hurricane to strike the country, another Category 5, made landfall on the Gulf Coast of the U.S. near Mexico Beach, Florida. At least 36 people confirmed dead. Since then, 47 is the number, and again, hundreds unaccounted for. So, the decade of hurricanes, and more to come, obviously. The 2010s, as we look at them, we skipped last week. I don't know how we missed this. Of course, Charlottesville, that horrible, horrible incident, which we can't just let this stand alone. It was sort of the moment that represented an entire decade, as one writer puts it on Medium.com. The 2010s, the decade of white people. We were so close, I'm reading now. For a minute there, it seemed like America had come to its goddamn senses. It closed out the first decade of the new century by electing its first African-American president, while simultaneously handing him healthy, veto-proof majorities in both the House and the Senate, after a decade of letting the fear drive us into the arms of a half-witted doofus by the name of George W. Bush, who seized that opportunity to fail spectacularly at virtually every conceivable measure of the public trust in return. Let's skip ahead. For most of the last 50 years, you could argue that America didn't get any less racist. In some ways, it got even worse. But at the bare minimum, at least some, if not most, white people went underground. But then Barack Obama came, and white people lost their fucking minds. It's possible no single person in American history posed a greater existential threat to every pillar of white supremacist orthodoxy than Barack Hussein Obama, and that's when they realized it was time to up their game. Yeah, I think this is a reasonable analysis. Skipping ahead, Donald J. Trump stumbled into this shit zeitgeist like every other accident of success in his life. It's a glowing testimony of how good it is to be rich. The only thing that ever separated Trump from being a third-rate used car salesman bouncing from one sketchy lot to another across Long Island was the Scrooge McDuck pile of money his father accumulated as an openly racist slumlord in the 1960s and 70s. So, right, Trump comes in and throws gasoline on the fire. So, yeah, the 2010s started with resentment of Barack Obama and then ended with the MAGA hat. It was bad. So let me just read this final paragraph. When the history books are written, or at least scrawled on the sides of collapsed buildings in pig's blood in the coming post-apocalyptic hellscape, let the record show that the 2010s belonged lock, stock, and barrel to white people, and we are all poorer for it. Let's hope maybe this go-round we can shove these people back in the closet and start trying to perfect this union once again. I don't know how many more shots we're going to get at this. So, not bad. Not bad. A little essay there by a guy named Buck Down. Yeah, Charlottesville, Nazis, fascists, white supremacists. We did our decade in review last week, but we missed a couple of important things. The Trump-Putin summit in Helsinki was a big moment of the decade, I believe. We can't make this all about Trump, but that was a moment that we need to not forget. When Agent Orange fawned all over Putin, and when asked directly about the interference in U.S. elections, well, I don't see why he would do it. But, Mr. President, all 17 intelligence agencies agree that Russia interfered. Well, President Putin just said very strongly that he didn't, so I don't see why he would. So that was both weird and chilling. The Helsinki conference between Agent Orange and Vladimir Putin. Looking at the 2010s, this story came and went with very little uproar. Certainly not what it deserved. Remember the Paradise Papers? Paradise Papers leak reveals secrets of the world's elite's hidden wealth. This from The Guardian, November of 2017. The world's biggest businesses, heads of state, and global figures in politics, entertainment, and sports who have sheltered their wealth in secretive tax havens are being revealed this week in a major new investigation into Britain's offshore empires. The details come from a leak of 13.4 million files that expose the global environments in which tax abuses can thrive, and the complex and seemingly artificial ways the wealthiest corporations can legally protect their wealth. The material, which has come from the offshore service providers and the company registries of 19 tax havens, was obtained by the German newspaper Süddeutsche Zeitung. The project has been called the Paradise Papers. It reveals, here are the headlines, millions of pounds from the Queen's private estate have been invested in a Cayman Islands fund, and some of her money went to a retailer accused of exploiting poor families and vulnerable people. Another, extensive offshore dealings by Donald Trump's cabinet members, advisors, and donors, including substantial payments from a firm co-owned by Vladimir Putin's son-in-law to the shipping group of the U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross. Another, how Twitter and Facebook received hundreds of millions of dollars in investments that can be traced back to Russian state financial institutions. The tax-avoiding Cayman Islands Trust, managed by the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's chief money man, and a previously unknown $450 million offshore trust that has sheltered the wealth of Lord Ashcroft. So these are just a few of the headlines, but basically what the Paradise Papers revealed, maybe it's because we all knew this, just it was kind of obvious, and it confirmed it. Maybe that's why it wasn't the biggest news in the world. But how the rich, how the elite are able to manipulate, bribe, hide their assets. The Paradise Papers was a huge story for about a day. And to my mind, it should be remembered as one of the great stories of the decade. And if there was such a thing as justice in the world, something would have been done. Something would have happened. So the Paradise Papers may be an illustration of our cynicism, our lack of wherewithal just to do anything about, even when horrible things are revealed. Well, what can we do? So, money. Speaking of papers, the Afghanistan Papers, very much historically parallel with the Pentagon Papers. And basically, if you miss this story, again, some of this stuff gets a day or two's worth of news coverage, and then we never hear about it again. But I would definitely put this, well, let's see, when did this happen? This is just this year. I guess late 2018, early 2019. Yeah, military leaders, high officials, presidents, writing to each other, communicating with each other about the war in Afghanistan, which is now nearly 20 years old and continues. And these communiques revealing the failures, how we're losing this thing. It's just nothing's working. Nothing but bad news. And all these communiques in real time, simultaneously with public proclamations about how the war is going well, we've got them on the run. So, yeah, they just lie to us. Lie. Yeah, the 2010s. I mean, your hero, Barack Obama, was president, but the guy was never a liberal. He kept us in these wars. He dropped more bombs from drones than any other human in history. You know, the president has a couple different jobs, and one of them is just to be a decent sort of figurehead. You know, be a generally nice person and a smart person and a compassionate person, you know, to be that representative. And he did that job as well or better than any other president in history. But behind the doors, he was doing the job of other presidents, continuing the empire, continuing the violence, continuing the never-ending war that began before the country even was conceived. So, yeah, love Barack Obama for his personal decency, his public persona. He did represent the United States as well or better than anyone else has. But, you know, he's doing what he's doing. He's doing what presidents do, all except Jimmy Carter. You know I love Jimmy Carter. So what else did we miss last week in our Decade in Review? Oh, okay. These two are huge. Deepest apologies for not mentioning. We did mention Greta Thunberg. We gave her a little time. But Emma Gonzalez from the March for Our Lives and her fellow student activists. Taking a look right here at, let's see, Mother Jones, heroes of the 2010s, fearless, fed-up students who called out all the bullshit. March for Our Lives and the school climate strike defined a new generation of witty, furious activism. Yeah, definitely worth a mention as we're looking at the 2010s. Let me give credit. James West, Deputy Editor, Digital for Mother Jones. Furious, funny, and fed up, true heroes of the decade, the students who spoke up, walked out, and shook us from paralysis and moral complacency. I'm talking, of course, about the recent youth movements, March for Our Lives and the Global Climate Strike, school walkouts. Each was a unique response to a monumental crisis, but they are linked by organizational prowess and by an unfiltered, we call BS ethos. The latter best embodied by student leader Emma Gonzalez, who secured her place as an icon of this long American decade. Enough is enough, they said, and their howls for action on guns and climate policy now define a new generation of activists. They boomered the old guard with digital native nuance that deflected even the most savage attack, making critics look precious and obsessed. Yeah, Emma Gonzalez, David Hogg, Greta Thunberg, as we look at the decade, their activism, they're here to stay, and I couldn't be happier about it and wish them all the best. And then speaking of protests, how we missed this, again, deepest apologies. Any decade review must include the protest at Standing Rock. Of course, the protest began in early 2016 when approval came for the Dakota Access Pipeline to run from North Dakota to southern Illinois, crossing beneath the Missouri and Mississippi rivers. So the water protectors of Standing Rock Indian Reservation made their concerns known, organized direct action, social media, and they're just trying to protect their water, their land, their religious and spiritual sites sacred to them. And we all remember the horrible scenes from the protests, water cannons and rubber bullets and pepper spray, dogs. So a story of inspiration, also a story of great sadness and hopelessness, if you take it that way. Let me look here. 2 years after Standing Rock protests, tensions remain, but oil business booms. This now from an article November of 2018 from National Public Radio. 2 years ago in North Dakota, after months of protests by thousands of indigenous environmental activists, pipeline opponents celebrated when the Obama administration denied a key permit for the Dakota Access Pipeline. A few months later, the Trump administration reversed the decision and approved construction. Pipeline opponents worried that a spill from the Dakota Access Pipeline would pollute drinking water for the nearby Standing Rock Sioux Reservation. It turned out to be a massive gathering, a worldwide gathering, recalls current Standing Rock Sioux Tribal Council Chairman Mike Faith. Faith says the protests sent a message to the world that Native Americans were standing up for themselves, engaging indigenous people from around the world to join the demonstrations. So Standing Rock, definitely worthy of a mention, and ultimately the pipeline has been built. And as predicted, there have been spills. And so the fight continues. And I really do. I hate for it to always come back to Agent Orange. But let's face it, with Republicans in the White House and in the Senate, only bad things will happen. Only bad things will continue to happen. And as we review this decade, it's going to be mostly defined by the obstruction of the entire Obama administration, led by Mitch McConnell, the only person on earth in contention with Donald Trump as the worst person on earth. And, I don't say that just as hyperbole. I don't say that just to make a point. In my personal experience, anybody I've ever met in my entire life, anybody I know about in public life, I really, honestly, without exaggeration, without hyperbole, have never encountered anyone even approaching the level of Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump for sheer assholery. It's like they are the bizarro politicians. Whatever you can do that's absolutely opposite of the right thing to do, they do it. In a callous, cynical, mean-spirited, just downright evil fashion. But let's not, don't want to get too down here. We got a new decade ahead of us. We'll try to get things going in the right direction. What else can we look at that we missed from our Decade in Review last week? Well, of course, whistleblowers. Edward Snowden, CIA employee, of course, leaked highly classified information from the NSA in 2013 regarding unlawful surveillance of Americans. So, Edward Snowden, American hero. Julian Assange, of course, detained and then arrested. A moment known maybe more for the iconic photograph than anything else, when Obama, Biden, Hillary, and others are gathered in the Situation Room to watch the killing of Osama bin Laden. Sandy Hook, the most heart-wrenching, the most devastating school shooting, 2012. Children, small children. And still the NRA and the right wing defend their guns. So yeah, the 2010s, man, was rough. Another little loose end here. Caitlyn Jenner accepted the Arthur Ashe Courage Award at the 2015 ESPY Awards. I guess there's a little bit of good news. The 2010s finally saw some recognition for transgender folks. Let's hope that continues. Of course, we had the ridiculous bathroom laws and all of that backlash. But let's be hopeful for transgender rights in the next decade. I don't think we mentioned Colin Kaepernick last week in our decade review. That was 2016, when, as a San Francisco 49er, he took a knee. Well, I'm sure we could think of other loose ends, but we have to stop sometime. Let's let it go at that. I'm going to recommend one post before I go. I'll share this on the Facebook page. 100 photos that defined the decade. Pretty good, pretty good. It's CNN, so take it with a little, just be aware of that as you're looking through it. So, for example, I'm just scrolling through here. I bet they don't give Standing Rock its due. I bet they don't. It's CNN. I haven't seen it yet. So keep that in mind. But having said that, it really is a pretty remarkable compilation of pictures, photos, great photos of the decade. So take a look at that. I'm Charles Purcell. You're listening to The Log.
It's The Log. I'm Charles Purcell. Don't have too much time left in the program. I wanted to leave you with this. It's a post I've seen in my social media a couple of dozen times at least. Everybody keeps sharing it. Everybody kept sharing it over the last year. And I had some thoughts about it, and I thought I'd share them with you. It's by a guy named John Pavlovitz. He describes himself as a writer, pastor, and activist. In the past 4 years, his blog, Stuff That Needs to Be Said, has reached a diverse worldwide audience. A 20-year veteran in the trenches of local church ministry, John is committed to equality, diversity, and justice, both inside and outside faith communities. He's got a book or two out. Okay, he seems like a good enough guy. I basically agree with this post I'm going to read to you, but I have issues. Let me first read it to you. You may recognize this. Headline: I'm not the radical left. I'm the humane middle. Posted September 26th of this year. Apparently, I've been radicalized and I wasn't aware. Certain people call me the radical left all the time. I never considered myself radical before. I just thought I was normal, ordinary, usual. I thought equality was important to everyone. I imagined America was filled with people who took that life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness stuff seriously, for all people. I thought the golden rule was actually mainstream. Recently, I took an inventory of my positions, screening for the extremism. I believe in full LGBTQ rights. I believe we should protect the planet. I believe everyone deserves health care. I believe all religions are equally valid. I believe the world is bigger than America. I believe to be pro-life means to treasure all of it. I believe whiteness isn't superior, and it is not the baseline of humanity. I believe we are all one interdependent community. I believe people and places are made better by diversity. I believe people shouldn't be forced to abide by anyone else's religion. I believe non-American human beings have as much value as American ones. I believe generosity is greater than greed, compassion better than contempt, and kindness superior to derision. I believe there is enough in this world for everyone. Enough food, enough money, enough room, enough care, if we unleash our creativity and unclench our fists. I'm not sure how these ideas became radical, though it seems to have happened in the last few years. I grew up being taught they were just part of being a decent human being. I grew up believing that loving my neighbor as myself meant that I actually worked for their welfare as much as my own. I was taught that caring for the least in the world was the measure of my devotion to God. I thought that inalienable rights of other people were supposed to be a priority as a decent participant in the world. I don't think I'm alone. In fact, I'm pretty sure that most people reside here in this place alongside me. The desire for compassion and diversity and equality and justice, that these things aren't fringe ideologies or extremist positions, but simply the best way to be human. I think most people want more humanity, not less. I think the vast middle is exhausted by the cruelty of these days. That these aspirations seem radical to some people is probably an alarm that they've moved so far into the extremes of their fortified ideological bunkers and been so poisoned by the propaganda that normal now seems excessive, that equality now seems oppressive, that goodness feels reckless. Maybe the problem is these people are so filled with fear for those who are different, so conditioned to be at war with the world, so indoctrinated into a white nationalistic religion of malice that they've lost sight of what being a human being looks like anymore. I am pretty sure that I don't represent the radical left, but the vast, disparate, compassionate, humane middle. People who are not threatened by someone else's presence, who do not see another person's gain as their loss, who don't worship a Caucasian American God. I suppose humanity feels radical to inhumane people. In that case, I'll gladly be here in my extremism. Okay, so there it is. Now, John Pavlovitz, that's a really nice piece. You seem like a really nice guy. I'm not going to assume anything bad about you at all. Something needs to be said, though, about this. Here's my issue. It's not enough to believe these things. It's just not enough anymore. Maybe it was at one time. I don't know. I know it's not today. It's not enough just to believe the right things. Now, John Pavlovitz, I'll give you credit. You've made a name for yourself. You wrote a very nice essay. So it's more than believing for you. You're articulating it very nicely. People are sharing it, and that's all good. However, the sinking feeling that I have about this essay and the fact that it's been shared millions of times is the danger that it could create some complacency. We share this essay with each other. We all agree about what good people we are and what good things we believe. And then there it just sits. Let's go through this list. Some of them at least, what we have time for. I believe in full LGBTQ rights. Good. I'm glad you do. If people are calling you a radical because you believe that, well, then I think you should embrace that label and actually be a radical. You need to fight every day, because I know for a fact my LGBTQ friends do not have the rights, respect, and dignity that they deserve. I know for a fact their lives are in danger in certain cases. Their right to live and love and work as they please is not secured. So yes, believe in full rights, of course. I'm just warning us, all of us, myself included. Don't just pat yourself on the back. Don't share this with others and show what a good person you are and link arms and share this good feeling among your friends. It's not nearly enough. If they're calling us radical, we have to be radical in the way we vote, in the way we organize, in the way we consume, in the way we live every day when we get up. So as great as this essay is, and it really is, this is a warning to all of us not to become complacent, not to become self-satisfied. I believe we should protect the planet. Well, that's a pretty big job. That's a very big job. We as a world community have to completely turn on its head the way we do business. The very nature of work, the very nature of production, the very nature of energy use. If you're not willing to do that, to understand what it's going to take to protect this planet and to act accordingly, then your little statement of belief isn't worth the paper it's printed on. I believe everyone deserves health care. There again, that's going to take a lot of work from a lot of people. It's going to take a political revolution for everyone to get health care. Believing is great, but it gets nothing done. I believe non-American human beings have as much value as American ones. Well, do you? Do you really? Because if you did, then you would advocate for open borders. And that would make you a radical. You're right. Your headline is right. I'm not the radical left. You're sure not. I wish you were. If you really believed that non-Americans were as valuable as Americans, then you would advocate for open borders. And that would make you a radical. And then you and I would be simpatico. I believe generosity is greater than greed. Well, you better not be happy with our current capitalist system, because the very system we live under enshrines greed over generosity. It puts greed in the driver's seat, and there's no getting around it. So if you believe generosity is greater than greed, then you must be an activist against capitalism. You can't live happily and comfortably under the current system and then make it all better just by stating your beliefs, especially if you're in a position of privilege. I believe there is enough in this world for everyone, enough food, enough money, enough room, enough care. Good. But your solution? according to your pithy little essay? Well, all we have to do is unleash our creativity and unclench our fists. What is that? That's just a feel-good aphorism. If there's enough in this world for everyone, which I agree, there is enough food, there is enough money, there is enough room, there is enough care for everyone on this planet. But there is no way in hell that the hungry, the poor, the homeless, the sick and the dying are going to get what they need without radical political revolution. You think most people share your beliefs? I agree. I think most people do. I also think most people are blind to the work necessary to accomplish the things you believe. Either willingly or unwittingly ignorant to the privilege you and your readers share. So that's my issue. I agree with your list, and I agree that most people agree with your list. I also think we have no idea how to get there. That's the way I wish you would have finished your essay. I wish the bottom line would have been, if you believe in these things as I do, all of us have to connect the dots, examine our own lives, examine how we live, examine how we vote, examine how we consume, and how each of those decisions either contribute to or keep us at arm's distance from these worthy goals you've articulated so well. So to John Pavlovitz and to his admiring readers, I just offer that thought. I believe he's a good person. I believe you're a good person. I believe all of us need to look at how the world works, look at our place in it, and it's time to do a 180. Because John Pavlovitz, you're right. You're not a radical. I don't care if people are calling you a radical. You're not, because a radical gets things done. No change in this country, no change in the world has ever happened without radicals getting it done. And that means fighting for it. That means changing their lives, dedicating their lives, fighting, making change. Believing alone doesn't make change. So if they're calling you a radical, well, hell, why don't you just become a radical? And let's get this stuff done. This episode of The Log is available right now wherever you find your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, iHeart, YouTube, and the podcast source. Enter Charles Bursell Presents in the search window. Or best yet, go to charlesbursell.com. There you'll find this and all the other series in the podcast family. Follow, comment, and contact me on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks to our flagship terrestrial station, River West Radio, riverwestradio.com. Theme music composed and performed by Peter Donalds. From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Bursell.